What's up, YouTube? This is Politically Incorrect, all right? So, before I get into this video, I just want to talk about my pet peeve regarding a certain Virginia law which bars incumbent governors from running for reelection, all right? Now, I understand why this old, antiquated law was created because it was created to prevent a governor from essentially becoming a dictator, all right? Now, for pretty much the entire 19th century, going into the 1960s, uh, Virginia was a solidly Democratic state, as was the entire South. All right, um, with very few exceptions, the Democrats ruled the South with an iron fist. This was the case in Virginia. All right, um, so much so that it was the primaries, it was the Democratic primaries that was the hotly contested race in which ultimately decided who was going to be governor in Virginia. Uh, this was the case all the way up until, I believe, the late 60s or into the 1970s. I think Linwood Holton was the first elected Republican in the history of Virginia. It was 1969. Uh, and I believe Linwood Holton is still alive, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, this was done to keep governors from being a dictator because, as we know in this country, incumbents are usually reelected by a 95 to 90% rate. So essentially, you can have a guy being reelected governor in a state like Virginia back in the 30s and 40s and 50s all the time. So they did that so that you didn't have one governor just monopolizing political power. But the time has come for that law to go. I think it's time for that law to just be erased. Now, after the 1960s, you could argue that the Republicans started having their little dynasty. From 1968 to 2004, the Republicans won every presidential election. All right. Now, on the state and local level, the Democratic Party still was dominant in many ways, but they were losing their dominance by the 80s and the 90s. All right, but now we have enough political parity in this state so that it really doesn't make any sense to keep having that law in place. I just want to mention that. That's why Terry McAuliffe wasn't able to run for re-election in 2017, and that's why Ralph Northam isn't able to run for re-election now because of that law. But anyway, the two choices for governor are Terry McAuliffe, Democrat, and Glenn Youngkin, the Republican. All right. Now, the reason why there's so much national attention to this election is because this election can provide and will provide a good barometer about how weakened the Democratic Party it truly may be going into next year's midterm elections. And also, this election can show just how galvanized, just how strong Republican enthusiasm is going into next year's midterm, which will determine the control of the House and the Senate. Now, Glenn Youngkin is interesting. I don't think he's an Ed Gillespie. Like Ed Gillespie ran against Ralph Northam 4 years ago, and Ed Gillespie did not run, I think, a really good campaign, and ultimately he lost by over 9 points. But I think Glenn Youngkin is going to do better than that. The question is, can he win? I don't know because look, up until August, Terry McAuliffe had a solid lead, not an overwhelming lead, but he had a solid lead of about 6, 7 points or so. But over the last month, Glenn Youngkin has surged to the point where he and McAuliffe are in a statistical dead heat. But the problem is this, though, in Virginia. In Virginia, Trump is not, or at least has not been, very popular. He lost both times on the ballot in 2016 and 2020. Last year, he lost Virginia by almost 10 points to uh, Joe Biden. So um, that's one of the reasons why Glenn Youngkin has distanced himself from Donald Trump to a large degree. However, Glenn Youngkin has, to me, done just enough to motivate Trump voters to his side. He clearly makes it known that he aligns himself with Trump on a lot of issues, but he also has, in my opinion, done a good job of not attaching himself too much to Donald Trump, which is what the Democrats are trying to do now. Now, Terry McAuliffe, I didn't think was a terrible governor. He did some good things, but I didn't think that he was a particularly popular governor. Uh, and the fact that what kind of pisses me off with the Democrats is that now that they're in a serious situation where they could possibly lose, now all of a sudden I see all these ads. And if you live in Virginia, you see them too. All these fucking ads you see on TV or sometimes on your phone or YouTube, where you see them now pandering to the black community. They have all these black legislators or state legislators, you know, all of a sudden all these black people trying to subliminally tell you, hey, vote for Terry. He's for us. He's for us. Vote for him. Glenn Youngkin put us back in chains. I'm like, kiss my ass. You guys don't do shit for us throughout the fucking for three and a half years out of 4 years. You guys don't pay us no goddamn attention. Then all of a sudden, when you guys are in trouble, he wants to come bail you out. And then when we do bail you out and we want something in return, you tell us to wait another 3 years. Well, I'll tell you what. Wait another 3 years for my motherfucking vote. You know what I'm saying? So fuck them. That's just my personal opinion. But I'm not a friend of the Republican Party either. So what's going to happen? I don't know. I really don't know. I know that the Democrats have a substantial lead in early voting, um, but that don't really mean much because didn't the Democrats have a substantial lead in early voting in Florida? But ultimately, they lost that vote on election day. Um, this is the thing. The last numbers I saw had the Democrats with a 55%, this estimated, they're going by party registration. The Democrats had something like a 55% to 39% advantage when it pertained to early voting. But if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty good with my memory. Sometimes a little off, but I'm pretty good with my memory. I thought I remember the Democrats with early voting when it came to election last year. I thought I remember them having something like a 20-point lead at one point. But the problem was on election day, Republicans overwhelmed the Democrats at the polls, and that's why the results were so close nationally. But so I don't know about that cushion whether it's going to be enough. But another problem you got to worry about, however, when you're Glenn Youngkin, is polls are one thing, but can Glenn Youngkin match the enthusiasm that Trump gets? See, it's a different thing. Trump got people to vote for him to come to the polls. You know what I'm saying? Trump got his base. Trump himself motivated his base. Kind of subordinate, like Glenn Youngkin, who's been a little bit tepid, like I said before, and attaching himself to Trump. Can he motivate those voters? My gut, my gut is telling me that this is going to be an extremely close election. There are many people who think that Terry McAuliffe is going to win by 4, 5, 6 points. I think they're off. My instincts are telling me, like I said, I could be wrong, but my instincts are telling me that Glenn Youngkin can win by a point. Terry McAuliffe might win by 2, maybe approaching 3 points, but I'm thinking more 2 and under. That's my position. I think Terry McAuliffe at the most is going to win by 2 points. If Glenn Youngkin is going to win, it's going to be barely. Um, and I could be wrong, but I'm just going by my gut. You know what I'm saying? Um, I think that there may be a surprising number of Democrats who will switch to Youngkin. I'm going to tell you something else too. I would not be encouraged if I'm a Republican, if I'm a Democrat, excuse me, by 2 new polls that have come out. Remember, Joe Biden carried the state by 10 points less than a year ago. Okay? Less than a year ago, Joe Biden carried the state of Virginia by almost 10 points. Do you know that there's 2 polls that have come out that put Joe Biden's approval rating in Virginia at 41% and 42%, respectively, and his disapproval at 52%? If I'm a Democrat, those numbers make me nervous. Therefore, I'm going to go on a limb. I'm going to go on a limb. I think Glenn Youngkin ekes it out. I think he's going to eke out a victory. I think that he's going to do better than expected when it comes to uh, uh, Latinos, and I think he's going to do better than expected when it comes to black males. I think that the Democratic base just isn't going to be as motivated. And at the end of the day, I think it'll be just enough for Glenn Youngkin to eke out a victory. Of course, I can be very wrong, and McCullough wins by 10 points, you know. But I'm going by what I feel, and I usually don't do that, but I think that there's something going on. I think there's a lot of dissatisfaction with Biden. With, I think that there's a lot of people who want to make a point, and what better point is that than to vote for a candidate just out of fucking spite? So I don't know. Tell me what you guys think.